So you're starting a new character in a TTRPG, and you're just trying to figure out what's going to hit the mark in this game. Maybe you're going to make a character that ascends beyond heroism, or a dark, dreary character that climbs out of the depths of some family betrayal. Nonetheless, you've probably got about 10, 20 pages of backstory that you put on the desk in front of your GM, or email it to them, or Discord them, just crossing your fingers, hoping they look at it, they're moved, and they take maybe a slither, a sentence, maybe even a paragraph, and inject it into your campaign. Then, of course, 10 sessions go by, then 30, then 50. And while the campaign was fun, you're a little bummed that you didn't really hit the mark that you thought you were going to. Well, today, my friends, we're going to go into two topics that Fabula Ultima brings to the table that makes me love this game so much. And it's going to give your character narrative, your drive, your investment in who you meet, who you fight, who you want to be around matter. And that we're going to achieve by discussing traits and bonds. Let's check it out. Now, before we get started, I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone who has liked and subscribed to my channel. I didn't really expect any type of rocket ship of success into the cosmos, and by no means are we even close to that. But to see where I was just single digit maybe a month ago, and I'm now sitting at around 43 subscribers, that means so much to me to see that people not only want to learn more about Fabula Ultima, but are entrusting me in delivering articulate and hopefully entertaining information. So going forth, please like, subscribe anything going forward, and let's learn more about Fabula Ultima. So as we jump into this topic, we're going to start with the first of the two, and that being traits. And traits, I like to say towards players that I onboard, and maybe just some people that are asking about it, is think of it as a 3-section condensed index card versus the 10 to 15 page backstory you're throwing on your GM's desk. Because I assure you, this index card is going to deliver more character narrative, more drive, and more excitement than that backstory ever would. And that is achieved by the 3 sections, starting with identity, theme, and origin. So when it comes to identity, the core rulebook just simply puts it as a general concept of who your character is. And I think the easiest way to produce that concept is just to kind of give your character a notoriety or nickname of what they are. In the book, they use the term Sky Pirate or Queenless Knight that kind of drives the narrative of who to expect your character to be from your player's perception and the player character's perception. I like to use Final Fantasy VI as an example. I'm going to put it on a video here as I kind of give it a narrative. When we go into Final Fantasy VI and you're brought into a new playable character, what it normally does is it zooms in and fades to black on the character. You normally get some sort of little bit of theme music that kind of goes with the style of the character, and then with that a little snippet of who they are, to which then it transitions to naming your character if you don't want the name that's already there. I think that's what Fabula Ultima is trying to achieve in this game by leaving it open-ended to not only be meaningful but open to change. So the next topic within traits is theme. And in the core rulebook, they use theme as a strong ideal that generally represents your character. And that can be used with ambition, hope, justice, and there's a long list in the core rulebook that it gives options to, and even encourages you to think of a singular word theme that represents your character best, that really adheres to the backstory that you're trying to tell with your character. Now, as the game continues, this can change through multiple means, whether it's something a character development occurs in your own fruition, or maybe something even darker or effective happens in the game that changes their drive. But at face value, it really is the tone of your character. Now, of course, you don't want to get pigeonholed and not allow complexities and emotions and things grow with your character, but it is important to have this one undertone, this strong idea to represent your character. So we're going to go into the third and final bit of the trait section, and this one's probably the easiest one to go into, and that is origin. It's where you're from. That's literally what it is. It's where you're from. But also keep in mind that the origin has probably already been created during the world building process with your GM and players in the campaign development. And you already have some knowledge, and they have some knowledge of what it means to be from that origin. And for any character, it could be something simple as a small fishing town where your only true memories are the laughter of your mother, the boastful pride of your father, and the smell of baked goods down the street. Or if you're like me and can't live with happiness or joy, those memories are faded away by the smell of raised buildings and the cries of your neighbors. Either way, that's already probably been preset, and it's already a foundational point of concept for your character. Now, going back to the whole thing about traits, it's a condensed index card of your backstory. There are 3 concepts that are pretty simple at face value, but allow phenomenal complexities to grow into your character that can be either changed by your own accordance or throughout the game's development. Now we're going to jump into the second section of our How to Fabula Ultima session with bonds. Now, bonds have just as much importance in the character drive and narrative as traits do, because as traits make a molded idea of who they are, what they're trying to achieve, where they're from, bonds are the growth of relationships that you continue to obtain throughout the game, whether through your own personal drive of liking someone, having disdain towards someone, or them enforcing it on you because of some sort of action. And what I love about this in Fabula Ultima is it has all of this mechanical bonding that allows you to really go forth, meet people, learn what they think about them, and then you can use those as tools to have certain boons in the game, whether it's through an addition to rolls or maybe throwing some extra modifiers into the game, which we'll go into later as we talk about another important factor in Fabula Ultima. But going back to bonds, we're going to go ahead and look over to the character sheet so we can look a little more at face value, the minor complexity that comes with this. But when I show it to you, I think it'll make sense pretty quickly. Let's check it out. So as we did in our last video, we're going to return back to the star of the Press Start module, Blair Clairemont. And if you look at the top left here, we originally focused on attributes and their translation to checks. But if we descend just a little bit further down, you're going to see our 2 topics of today, traits and bonds. Now, with traits, I've already discussed in depth what they mean, but we're going to go over a quick highlight of their identity, their theme, and origin, all filled in with what is relevant to the character of Blair Clairemont. But the whole point of this character sheet is actually to go just a little bit further down to bonds. And I want you to solely focus on the row I have it with basically click to input in. These are mimicked to be 1, 2, 3 different characters you can have in the sections. And actually in Fabula Ultima's full version, you can have 6, but this character sheet is used as a condensed version to help with learning. Now, with bonds, as I said, they're an emotional grow with not only characters, but they can be NPC. Well, characters can be defined as player characters that you are doing adventures with in your game, or even NPCs that your GM creates, or even some NPCs that your players can manifest through other mechanical means. Doesn't matter really who they are or what they are in context of how they're created. What matters is the growth throughout the adventure. Now, we're going to only focus on this one row right now. And as you can see, there is the character name injection. And then right to the right of it, you have 3 columns. And you'll notice in each column, there is a pairing of emotions. On column 1, there's admiration and inferiority. Column 2, there's loyalty and mistrust. And then on column 3, affection and hatred. When you are developing bonds, you can only select one emotion from each column. And I'm going to show you exactly what that means in just a quick scenario. So Blair Clairemont's friend, Edgar, who is an inventor and is on the road with them. Let's say this is the first bond that Blair has developed with any characters in the game. So we're going to go ahead and put in the name Edgar. So we have a decision to make. Let's say there's something that's happened in the game that has invoked one of these emotions. At this moment, you have a choice of whatever you want. Let's say we're just going to keep it simple instead of complex. We're going to just say that Edgar does something very impressive by like repairing something that was in deep need or a crash was going to happen. Blair sees this and develops admiration for Edgar. So now that you see this clicked, Edgar has now developed a bond score of 1. But let's say as the adventure continues and their friendship blossoms and there's another moment where the player who controls Blair decides they want to add another bond to Edgar. Well, this column has already been taken for. So you as admiration's taken, you cannot take inferiority. You must check one of the other 2 columns. And this creates a chain of emotions that continues to grow and develop. So as you're probably seeing this go forth, and I'm keeping it simple, let's just say that admiration also blossoms into loyalty. We now have a bond score of 2 for Edgar. And with that admiration and loyalty, time goes over and there begins to be affection and maybe a love for that character. We now have a bond score of 3. So what does that mean? They have a bond score of 3. Well, in Fabula Ultima, there's mechanical values that come from your bond score, and it can be defined in very many different options. First off, they have what are called group checks and initiative. We'll go into those in another video, along with an extension from the extension of checks that I spoke from the first video. But basically, in a group check, you pick a leader, whoever's going to lead the check. Well, let's say that leader is going to be Edgar. Well, in group checks, everyone else rolls a check to see if they help boost the leader. Well, the great thing about bonds is if you have a bond score with that leader, it gets applied. Now, you can only have 1 bond applied to that leader, but in this circumstance, Blair has a 3. So if Edgar is running any type of group check and Blair is involved in it, immediately Edgar gets a +3 to their rolls, which is phenomenal for the character mechanics to go with the character narrative. Now, also, there is a meta currency that is used in Fabula Ultima called Fabula points, and that one definitely is going to get its own video and probably will be my next video to come. But you can use these Fabula points as players to be spent, and you can use them to invoke either your traits or your bonds. With traits, if you roll a check and let's say you're not happy with the roll, you can use a Fabula point to invoke your trait, to use one of the identity, theme, or origins as an inspiration to narrate what the character is doing to justify a reroll. And you can reroll both one or singular dice or the both of the dice. Now, with bonds, you can then use your Fabula point to invoke your bond score to a scenario as far as a roll if your the person with the bond is in your scene. So in this an example, Edgar is in the scene, and let's say I ask a roll for Blair Claremont to be performed, and they need a 10. Well, they roll a 7, and that's not enough to achieve. But then they realize, they go, well, I would actually like to spend a Fabula point for my bond with Edgar of 3, as I have such admiration, loyalty, and affection to them. It is important to me that I ascend to the top and achieve this so we can continue to move forward in the adventure. Simple as that. It's a little bit of a narrative definition, and with that, you get to add 3 to your roll, and they achieve the 10. Now, there is more to it on that, but at the same time, it's important to realize that while this sounds complex, all I'm saying is as you grow with a character, you make a check that creates an increase of a bond. Simple as that in the long run. I know that was very long-winded on my behalf to explain, but I really think a visual is important in this scenario. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean you have to go straight down the line of the most common, I don't want to use the word boring, but predictable allied bonds. You can start having a bond with let's say a villain. You can feel inferiority and mistrust and hatred. And let's just call him Vox. So now mechanically, this probably doesn't have as much value at points, but at the same time, you can use this once again pretty loose-ended if you need that extra 3 to the roll. And you can say, I'm with Blair almost falling to submission, their hatred, their inferiority, their mistrust to the whole scenario, that they know Vox has something to do with this. They will not kneel, and they will find the success they look for. Once again, that's another narrative definition and using a reason to spend the bond. So I think at this point, I am now going to create a little more convolution if I continue to talk. So we're going to stop it right there, but also know the bonds have many other great needs that are provisions in this game. There's classes that use bonds to give pluses to attacks and maybe certain defenses. There's even weapons that you can develop with strengths based on bonds. So just keep in mind, bonds have a lot to do with this game. So now that we've been through traits and bonds, I hope you have a little bit more of an understanding of what they do mechanically, but at the same time, these have such grand importance to the collaborative narrative of this game. I have never seen a system anything like it that takes the efforts of making people understand who your character is, how they develop relationships, and then redirect them into a mechanical value that helps your rolls, gives boons to certain weapons, gives all kinds of mechanical injections that, once again, is a spotlight and a love letter to why I talk about this game. So I understand that maybe my example of bonds may have been a little bit convoluted. And to be perfectly honest, even in my onboarding of Fabula Ultima's press start, I continually try to see my best way of articulating to them without them being able to just experience it. I promise you, when you just give it a little bit of go on a character creation or just maybe a couple of roles in the game, it makes perfect sense. It is addition level of sensibility. So if you do not think that my video gave you enough to understand, please put in your comments and I am happy to talk to you about that. I really want this to be understood because I really think when it comes to Fabula Ultima as a whole, this is the complexity that kind of just stops an explanation, but afterward, it is free flow all the way through. So I appreciate once again you listening to me, and I look forward to more videos of Fabula Ultima in my sessions of How to Fabula Ultima. I'll see you next time.